name is Tin.
And hi, my name is John.
My name is Roseanne.
And we are Desire for Holiness. We are three young Catholics ready to share with you our desire to be holy through our stories, our imperfections, and our love for Christ.
In the end, you don't have to be perfect to be a masterpiece.
God works through our brokenness and puts the pieces back together more beautifully than we could ever do ourselves.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our third episode of Desire for Holiness. Today we are honored to have Father Paul MacNeil join us. In this episode, we are going to be talking about seeking the truth and about the priestly life. So, hi Father Paul.
Hello everybody, nice to see you.
Hey. We're so glad you're here. But first, before we get into the really deep question and answer, we wanted to get to know you a little more. And so we're just gonna ask some quick fire questions.
Ooh.
Ooh. So the first question is, what is your favorite dessert?
Oh, I love a chocolate eclair, or those Joe Louis you get in the restaurant.
Oh no!
Those caramel ones with the gooey caramel Joe Louis ones. I think they're Vashon cakes or something. Those are amazing. I like chocolate too. Not a big cake eater or pie eater, but chocolate and chocolate eclairs and Joe Louis are the best. I have a Joe Louis. That's my favorite. Yeah, but a good chocolate bar.
Ooh,
Yes.
good to know. You heard it here.
That's good to know.
Remember that.
Yeah.
Remember that.
We'll remember.
Remember that.
For all our viewers. And comments over. Awesome. And the next question is, what is your favorite prayer?
Oh, I got to say it's a prayer of St. Francis. I think that's a beautiful prayer. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. They say they're not sure if St. Francis actually wrote that himself. But I find the theology of it, I don't have it right in front of me, but I use that a lot as an anchor for my meditation, actually. I will sit in the Blessed Sacrament, before the Blessed Sacrament, for a half an hour or so and just say that prayer very slowly, trying not to think too much as I say it, but just trying to let it kind of absorb into me. Make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's doubt, faith. It's just such a beautiful prayer. Grant that I may not seek too much to understand it, to be understood, and to love is to love. That's sort of a good. You could live your life on that prayer, and you would be really happy. So would a lot of people. So would the people that got in touch with you. That's my favorite prayer.
That is so beautiful. Yeah.
You have to post it or something, because I don't know if I could say the whole thing.
Sure. We'll post it for our viewers.
Yes,
We'll post it to our viewers.
No, for
Yes,
sure.
check it out somewhere there. Yeah, and
somewhere on this corner.
somewhere.
There.
Yes. And the third one is, if you weren't a priest right now, what do you think you'd be doing? And this is just a hypothetical question, I guess. If you weren't a priest,
Oh, if I wasn't a priest, okay.
Yeah.
If I was.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah, so if you weren't a priest right now, what do you think you'd be doing instead?
Well, that's a great question. I had to. You may be surprised at the answer to this, because I have no idea, because God calls everybody in different ways. But I have always really loved science, and I could see myself studying science, and especially physics, but I also had a love for philosophy, and the two are connected a lot. These big questions, like where do we come from? I really wish, and as a matter of fact, years ago, not that long ago, maybe 10 years ago, I was really thinking about going back to school, and I thought about maybe studying science just part-time, just for fun, as a priest. There are a number of priests out there that are physicists and astrophysicists, and I love that. That's always captured my imagination. I could see myself doing that, doing research, but I don't know if I'm smart enough. So, so there you go.
Oh, that's so
Wow,
cool.
that's actually really interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
My brother studies physics, so I think that's really interesting. Wow. And I didn't know that priests studied also on top. They could study on top of their priestly work.
Well, they can. As a matter of fact, years ago, but when I was just ordained a priest, I was working with Bishop O'Mara at the time, and my job was as a newly ordained priest. I was his what's called his master of ceremonies, which really was a fancy thing, meaning I drove him everywhere. But I was looking after the liturgies that he was at just to make sure everything ran fairly smoothly for him, I guess. But one time he'd asked me to pick him up, and he had a guest with him, and the guest was a Jesuit priest, and he was a director of the Vatican Observatory. And he was fascinating. He was an astrophysicist, and I thought, wow, this is like really cool.
Wow.
That is so cool.
Yeah. As the kind of priest that I am, I chose to become what's called a diocesan priest, which means that I work directly with the bishop. I would need tons of special permission to really go full time with that. I'm right now studying part-time still. I'm working on my PhD in religious studies, actually at Mac. I just have to finish my dissertation. I've done all that part-time. I've been chipping away at that for quite a while. As long as I do it part-time, it doesn't interfere with my duties as a pastor. It's fine. Yeah, you can study what you're interested in. And it's always good to have as a priest to have a kind of a hobby or something that you're interested in. But in fact, when I was deciding whether to do either a PhD part-time in religious studies, that's when I was deciding whether or not to study science. And I thought, well, I've already got 2 master's degrees in philosophy, so maybe I should kind of continue in plus religious studies plus theology. Maybe I should go in that direction, which I did. So, because that would have been like starting over in school. I have a BA, I'd have to get a BSc right off the bat. But I think studying, it may come up later on in one of your questions, but studying, I think, is learning. I think studying is different, but learning is, I think, one of the things that makes us human. And I would encourage everybody everywhere to continue to learn. And learning is not necessarily about the head either; it's about the heart. Learning about yourself, and in fact, every difficulty that you have, every crisis that you go through, there's always that gift of something to learn about yourself. And I've always tried to live my life like that, and to be challenged. So anyway, yeah. So I could see myself doing that if I wasn't actually.
That's amazing.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Father Paul. Actually, that's perfect.
Motivation.
Yeah.
For the students.
Yes. And that's actually a perfect segue. That's perfect how you mentioned the big questions in life, and all about seeking the truth. And yeah, actually, we're just very excited to hear. Could you tell us more about how your faith journey has been, and how you came into the truth of the Catholic Church? Or tell us about that.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to, and I'm glad that you did ask that question about what I would do if I wasn't actually a priest, because I think that is a great way to kind of allow me to introduce some of the answer to that very question, because I obviously I haven't been a priest all my life. I wasn't in junior kindergarten as a priest, I would imagine. And I never really thought that much about being a priest in my childhood at all. It was not something that was always very important to me. As far as my faith goes, I think it was probably more important to me than I realized at the time. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but it's kind of talking about my childhood for a little bit, because I had a pretty normal childhood. But when I was in high school, I went to high school went to a Catholic high school, and Dennis Morris, actually, if anybody knows where that is.
Oh yeah, I went there. I graduated from there.
Yeah, back in the day, there's a funny story about that, because back in the day, Dennis Morris was really, really crowded. It was a small school. That whole area where the cafeteria didn't exist on that one side, and it was all portables out the back. It was just a tiny place. And the student population was about 1,600, I think, was at the time.
Wow.
The packed. I remember getting tickets to a Max Webster concert, and I thought I was going to get crushed in the hallway trying to buy. And then I ended up getting sick. I couldn't go to the concert.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh,
I don't know if you guys ever heard of Max Webster, but anyway, what's his name? I forget his name. My mind's gone blank. But anyway, let go of the wire. Well, who did that? Anyway, never mind. It was very, very crowded. But the religion courses in the school were interesting, but they were weak. Probably the best religion course that I took at the time was the history of religion, actually, because it was as close to a world history that I've ever had. But the rest of it was a little on the weak side. It was more of and it was amazing because when I did end up going, I went to the seminary right after high school. And when I went to the seminary, I could not believe how rich theology is, how many, it was incredible. And I thought, wow, I really missed a lot when I was in high school. But what was interesting about that time in my life was, and I'm very happy to share this with you, was it was a time of real exploration. When I was in high school in particular, like I went to church. I was an altar boy up from about grade 8 on. It was just going to church, right? Except for one thing I'm going to tell you about in a second. My two best friends growing up were twins, and they lived in the same block. And they were the youngest of a very large family of 14. And gradually their older brothers and sisters were they weren't Catholic, they were Protestant, and they were gradually turning to the Lord. They were gradually, each one was gradually getting saved, as they called it in their religion. They were really, so I watched this a little bit, and I think this is quite a fun. I remember one guy in particular, like he made such a transformation. I didn't recognize him, and I thought I knew all your brothers and sisters, but who's this guy, and because he was on the brink, he was going to kill himself. He was into drugs and into the whole rock and roll scene, the whole thing, and his life was empty. And I watched that transformation in him, and he kind of started hanging out with us, and some of his other brothers did too. And I thought, wow, they've got a good way about them. This Christianity thing is kind of neat, even though I was Catholic at the time. So then my two friends, they all of a sudden they got saved, kind of thing, and they started going to this Baptist church in St. Catharines, and periodically I would go with them. And I do remember one thing about that Baptist church. Actually, it was Garden City Baptist. If anybody knows of that church, it's on Linwell. I'm not sure if it's still there. But the preacher who was there at the time, I don't know, he was amazing. He just cut right through to my heart when I listened to him. And I thought I could listen to this guy. And oddly enough, I could never be anywhere near the kind of preacher that he was. But I could think to myself, I would really enjoy doing that. It was kind of funny. Now, I never thought of becoming a Baptist or anything like that, though I did. I sometimes joke with people that I was an atheist and I was a Baptist and a Buddhist, and now I'm Catholic. I'm working through the alphabet. That's true. I was Catholic all my life. But I was fascinated by their faith. I have to say, I really was. And now, interestingly enough, like I said earlier, I kind of said that, I don't think religion was as important to me. It was more important than I realized it at the time. My father, he's a teacher, retired now. He's still with us. He and my mom both. He had a master's degree in theology from the Pontifical Institute of Medieval Studies in Toronto, and so he was extremely well educated in Catholic theology. And I don't know if I really appreciated that when I was a child, or a teenager rather, but when I would go home and ask him questions about things, his approach was very open-minded, and what he really encouraged me to think it through on my own, to experience it on my own. I think he probably would have been somewhat disappointed if I joined the Baptist church all of a sudden. But on the other hand, that's not the way he came across. He kind of wanted me to really explain, because, I came from a family that really valued learning. And that's why I said earlier that learning, I think, is something really important. And so during that time, so that would be as I became a senior in high school, I became more and more interested in religion, and I started questioning it more. And the answers, the interesting thing about it is the answers just kept leading me deeper and deeper into it. I mentioned that I thought that the religious education part of my high school experience was probably a little bit weak, but it was enough to keep me interested. And so eventually I met a priest whom I thought he seemed to really enjoy what he was doing, and he had a very profound effect on me. And one day he just asked me, so I would have been probably 18, and he just asked me, had you ever thought of becoming a priest? And much to my surprise, I found myself saying yes. And I hadn't, it was bizarre. But I guess what I was saying yes to was more is that I see your lifestyle. I see you as a person, as a human. I like what I see. Maybe I can be that, somehow in my life. And so it was, and so that's how things. So the other strange thing that happened was when I was in that last year of high school, which actually we had grade 13 back in high school, right? In the day. So when I did my grade 13, my grades weren't high enough to go into the seminary. I couldn't get in. So I had to repeat my grade 13. And strangely enough, and I was just sharing this with a class of grade 8s actually just the other day. Part of the application to a seminary involves an IQ test, and the psychologist that was running the test said, no issues at all, you're fine, and sure enough, when I actually did finally get into the seminary, I was 19, 20 at the time. My first semester was all straight A's. So whatever was going on in those 6 years of high school, and the psychologist just said, well, it's probably because you were bored, you just weren't interested. And maybe you were also selling yourself short. Maybe somehow you were telling yourself that you weren't smart enough for this. And that can be a real problem. So it was quite an eye-opener for me to go into a seminary and suddenly realize that I could do the academic work. And that was really an amazing insight, into my life. The other strange, if I could just say this one more thing, I'm sure you guys have tons of questions further than that. And there's more to that story too, obviously, but because I left the seminary at one point anyway. But when I was in that last year in high school, well, maybe not the last year, but the second last year, before I actually answered yes to that question about becoming a priest, I was, for whatever reason, every night before I went to bed, I said a little night prayer. I was reading the Bible, trying to read it from cover to cover. I got almost all the way through it. And I was during Lent, I went to Stations of the Cross every night. And these were very strange devotions that a normal high school student might not on his own normally do, but I just did it. Yeah. And I think it's really important for us to understand that in our spiritual life, in our prayer life, it's not our effort necessarily in that sense. It's almost like a reward from God to make you interested in doing it. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever. I was just being myself. I just knew what I enjoyed doing. And for some reason, I look back now and I thought, wow, those Stations of the Cross for a high school kid, that must have been pretty boring, but it wasn't. I just found that that's what God was leading me to do, and God will lead us to do some amazing things, but it's God leading us, that allows it, not our, what is our effort? Our effort, what we have to do is be honest with ourselves, and love those that are around us. So that was kind of a little bit of a background into terms of what I was like growing up. And then I made the decision to go into the seminary. I went in, and then that was I was there for 4 years before I left. So that was an interesting experience as well. But before I go on to that a little bit, if you want me to, is there anything else you'd like me to talk about as well? How are we doing? Am I up like that here with you guys? Oh no, awesome. Father, we wanted to talk about physics, All right, you have to start over. That's a different podcast, I suppose, and I know nothing about physics. So.
No, that's awesome. Like, I just really thought it was interesting, everything that you've been sharing so far. And yeah, I'm really interested. Do you have any questions so far for the rest of you? Tim and John.
Oh, me and John. Oh, sorry. Maybe not a question. I just really liked how you talked about, like you're talking about like that IQ test, and then like the psychologist, I think you said they said maybe you were bored, or maybe you're just like cutting yourself short, saying like, oh, maybe I wasn't smart enough. I think that's really relevant for like everyone, because those are lies that don't come from the Father. You know, he tells us we're capable and he tells us we have all these gifts, but we buy into those lies. So I don't know. I just thought that was eye-opening. I like that part.
That's a fantastic observation, because, you know, the question is, what is it that holds us back? You know, and certainly, you know, we have our limitations. We all have limitations. You know, I'm not such a good baseball player because I can't really, you know, but, and I think it's recognizing, working within those limitations, but to realize that those limitations are sometimes our own doing, you know, and, you know, we, especially when it comes to matters of the heart, you know, I think that we hold back too much out of fear sometimes. And yeah, and of course, when you're young, I mean, you know, I was 17, 18 years old. I was, you know, an insecure teenager, like, you know, that's probably to be expected a little bit, you know, and it was just only a matter of time. And that time happened before I realized, okay, where are my talents? What am I good at? We may not know that at the time. You know, I had no idea what I was getting into when I decided to go into the priesthood. But there was one thing that was forming in my heart about how to live a little bit, and I think that's important too, because I was beginning to form an aspect of my personality, or an aspect of the way that I live, that I've held on to the whole time. And I think it's something to do with learning. I remember I talked earlier about how much I enjoy learning, and I think we have to continue to learn. But I also think that experience is something that becomes really important as well. And that's why I would always encourage young people, if they can, to travel and to learn and to challenge your own assumptions, you know, challenge what you actually believe sometimes, because the truth will come out. I think, Tin, as you were mentioning, and it does, it survives it. And don't think I didn't ask those questions when I was young. You know, maybe is the Catholic Church the right church? Is this the right place to be? And I asked those hard questions, continue to ask them, you know, and it always came back, not necessarily as an intellectual yes, but a yes in my heart, you know, because there have been times in my life when I have thought to leave the Catholic Church, where I thought this isn't the right thing. And what brings me back isn't necessarily an intellectual assent, but more something of my heart, you know. And it's we had a great talk the other day from a priest for our study day, for our days of recollection as clergy, and he was talking about an interview that Time magazine had done a few years ago about the cross. And you know, they interviewed this what they went to all the cities, and this one girl was from Detroit, and they just stopped people who were wearing a cross, you know, and they said to them, okay, why are you wearing that cross? You know, what does that mean to you? And just right, you know, and it was young people, old people, who are anyway wearing a cross. And some people didn't really know. Some people say, well, it's a nice piece of jewelry. And some people say, well, I'm a Christian. And this one girl they stopped and interviewed, she told a bit about her story. She said, well, I'm wearing this cross because I'm studying to be a minister in the Baptist church. It just happened to be, but she said, you know, so I'm studying theology to be, so I wear that, but she said, it's deeper than that. She said that when she was a young child, she was only 11 years old. And she said that she saw both of her parents were shot in front of her.
Whoa.
You know? Yeah, and she said that, you know, she said and I'm 11 years old, she said, and something happened, she said, where I imagine that, you know, Jesus' blood was mingled with her mom's blood. And she said that image just kind of came to her. And you guys are all old enough to appreciate that kind of imagery. It's really shocking, but she said, you know, she said, I don't know that I really understand the cross, but she said it was the cross that really helped me get through that. And what she said was, it's not that I understand the cross, but I get it. You know, and so that's you see, so when you're talking about, you know, experience in life and some of this, people, when I as a priest, you know, been doing this now for over 20 years, you know, when I see some of the tragedies that that people face, you know, I get it, I guess, you know, I think that's just where do people find the strength? You know, how can people,
Yeah.
and I do think that part of the strength that people can find is in Jesus Christ. And you know, it's not something that you can accept on an intellectual level. It's something that goes a lot deeper than that. And you know, it's quite miraculous when you see it. You know, even somebody going through some really hard tragedy. So, you know, that's that's the cross. So yeah, so it's really led me. And because of that, I've really valued in my life, getting back to my original point, the value of experiences, of, you know,
Yeah.
putting myself in situations where I might be tested. You know, I love that. And so, you know, I ended up on a path that actually led me out of the seminary, believe it or not. So 4 years in, you know, I'm thinking to myself, am I really being fulfilled? Is this really what God is calling me to be? Or is this who I'm really supposed to be? And those were hard days. You know, I'm sure that at this time in your lives, you're probably, you know, wondering about that yourselves. You know, is this, am I supposed to be dating this particular person, or am I supposed to be on this particular path in university or college, or what am I supposed to do with my life? How am I supposed to live my life? Those are great questions, and there's no easy answer to them, but the question itself is what's so beautiful, you know, and that's just keep the question going. Keep the question, you know.
I
Mhm.
really love what you said about how it's all like, and also the heart, like it's our heart that needs to like ask those questions too. I think sometimes it's like knowing, but then there's that journey from the head to the heart.
I
That
know, yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, you can't dismiss the head, but it's the head that causes us a lot of trouble. You know,
Yep.
Oh yeah, that is so
no,
true.
well, when you think about something like in high school, my own self-doubt, that doesn't come from my heart, that comes from my head. If I actually listened to my heart, I wouldn't have so much self-doubt. But hey, listen,
Yeah.
the same thing is true today. I'm 55 years old or something like that. I'm not sure what it is. But you know, it's still the same thing. When my head starts spinning and I start feeling all this doubt, that's where the devil gets in there with all these weird
Yeah.
ideas. But if I actually
Mhm.
quiet that a little bit and listen to my heart, you know, then the truth really speaks there, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, that's true.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of young people need to hear that nowadays too.
Yeah.
We're always thinking with our heads and not with our hearts a lot of the times. We overthink things way too much. I know, like, I do a lot. I overthink things way too much. And like sometimes I just have to listen to my heart and be like, okay, like find Jesus in my heart. Like
Well,
lead
that's
me where
really,
you want me to go.
yeah, that's really fine. That's true. That's true. Especially these days with the whole pandemic. But so how are we doing? What else would you want to know?
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned earlier how there's a journey with like the seminary and then leaving. Maybe you could tell us more about that, and then yeah, like how the journey has been going from there to now.
Yeah, that gives us a good framework, because I could easily, I really enjoy talking with you guys, and I could easily spend the next 5 or 6 hours with you. I think this is all supposed to be an hour, so that gives us a bit of a framework. I have a great story about my vocation that some of you may have heard. Some of you may have heard some of it. Some of you may not have heard all of it. But when I was in the seminary for that 4 years, the discovery that I can handle the academics was actually a lot deeper than maybe I realized at the time. I don't know. I said that before about being a child, but anyway, because what I fell in love with there was philosophy. I really enjoyed studying the ancient philosophers, Plato and Aristotle and Socrates. Nowadays, Socrates is one of my favorites, but then I thought, you know, I really want to be able to do this more. And so I remember asking one of our faculty members, the dean of the house at the time, if I could take a year off the seminary I wanted to do an honors degree in philosophy. And he said, no. He said, you're either here to study the priesthood or you're not. If you want to study philosophy, leave the seminary, study philosophy. That didn't really satisfy me, but I thought I'm going to take one more shot. So I did 3 years of philosophy, and I was entering my first year of theology. And when I entered that first year of theology, it just wasn't doing it for me. It was fantastic what we studied. We studied scripture, we studied canon law, we studied, ecclesiology, the Christology, who is Jesus, all these things that I thought that I would really, really want to learn and know about. I found I still was drawn back to philosophy. But what happened was I decided to take a little bit of time one summer. And I was working in construction at the time, actually, with my boss was a Pentecostal minister. He was kind of funny. But he was all confused about being, anyway, whatever. But he and I had to go. He passed away now, God bless him. But he taught me a lot about carpentry for sure. But when I went to a monastery for an extended retreat, and believe it or not, I thought the seminary is not working out for me. I still love my faith. Maybe I should become a monk. What about that? This is a very strict monastery. It was the Trappists. There were Cistercians. So they got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. They took a vow of silence. That was a promise of silence. So it was a little bit of talking. They had a vegetarian diet. They did about 4 hours of work a day, prayed in the chapel 7 times a day. And this was just a different lifestyle. And I thought, I didn't even know there were monks anymore, but there are. And, the contemplative life. And so they taught me how to pray. They taught me. So I stayed there with them for a whole month as an observer, thinking maybe I might like to become a monk. I went back the following summer for 4 months. My job there was helping with their fruitcake. They used to make fruitcake. It's true enough. My job was to put the whiskey in the fruitcake. We used Mayor's 1892 whiskey. We had a special syringe thing, so I would inject them with this whiskey. Some got more than others. The monk would walk by and say, "Here, hold out your arm. Try this." I used to joke because back in the day they didn't have recycling, so they used to haul out, these, because we made 30,000 cakes in a season, right? So they'd haul out with these big bags full of Mayor's 1892 whiskey. I could just see the garbage truck guys saying, "Man, I gotta be a monk." Look at all the whiskey. How many guys are in there? Basement or something. But it was funny because I used to have to make the whiskey. They told me to make the whiskey in the sign of the cross, when I did it, right? And over the little round cans, But I got lazy. We used to have a little special bib that we'd wear with the bottle of Mayor's 1892 whiskey and a tube going out into the little syringe, and we just injected it. So I sewed one up. I got one with two, two syringes, and I said, I'm not going to spend all day doing this. So I did this. So some of those fruitcakes were holier than others, I think. But anyway, it was a great experience. But here's what happened. I remember seeing this monk, and they told me this monk was a mystic, and he's 84 years old, spent his entire life in the monastery. And I thought, now because I'm in the seminary for 3 years at that point, what's it like to be a mystic? We talk about mystics as people with this very deep spirituality and I couldn't wait to see what he's like. A guy that prayed that much, 84 years old, in the silence of the monastery, and he prays. I mean, he probably pretty near talks right to God, I would imagine. Well, it was interesting because when I met him, I looked into his eyes and I saw the most compassionate person I'd ever met. He was filled with love and just a beautiful person. And I remember when we used to do the Stations of the Cross privately in front of our rooms where we lived. They were called cells, but they were little rooms, and I would hear him weeping sometimes, as he did them, and that was beautiful. And as I was in that monastery, what I was learning about in terms of spirituality and what it means to be a mystic was that it is all about love. It is, in fact, one of the names for a monastery is a school of love. And at that point, what I suddenly realized was I don't need to be a priest to be a man of love. That if my Christian vocation, my Catholic vocation, whatever it is, primarily it is to be a man of love. And thinking of that, discovering that in my heart, well, it gave me the courage and the peace to decide to actually leave the seminary after that. So that was 4 years in. And what I wanted to do when I left the seminary was explore, was to explore myself, to explore the world, And So I set on a mission to do as much traveling as I could. What I actually did was I decided to continue my studies in philosophy. I got a master's degree in philosophy at McMaster University. My specialty was logic and argumentation theory, believe it or not, nothing to do with theology at all. While I was there, the religious studies department, which ironically is what I'm in right now, and the philosophy department, they're at University Hall, they were in the same building. And our offices downstairs were intermingled with religious studies. So we all became good friends. And there was one girl, she was going to head over to India to do some Sanskrit translations. And she asked if any of us wanted to go. And I said, yeah, I'm there. The adventure, Indiana Jones, I'm going, bring me on, I'm doing it. And, but her funding fell through, but I still had it in my heart to go. And the only connection that I had to go was some seminarian friends that had been to Calcutta to volunteer with the Missionaries of Charity. That's St. Mother Teresa's order.
So cool.
Now, you're not going to believe this, but here's the funny part about it. You're all thinking, okay, wow, yeah, who wouldn't want to go work with Mother Teresa's sisters in that? It had nothing to do with it. What it was that, you didn't have to apply for it. There's no application process. You just showed up, right? So, if you want to go work for the Peace Corps or some Red Cross or some volunteer organization like that, you got to go vet everything and you got to go through all this, And I thought this is easy. So I sent them a letter, and sure enough, I got back a letter from this nun, Sister Priscilla, and it was a form letter all typed out. And you know what she said? I asked her, can I volunteer there, And she just said, come with a heart ready to love and with arms ready to serve. And I go, okay, I'm going. So I went to Travel Cuts and I got me a ticket to, I think I paid $1,200. I went from Toronto to Vancouver, to Seoul, to Taiwan, to Hong Kong, stayed in Hong Kong for a couple of days because I had some friends there, and then went to Bangkok in Thailand, and then went to Calcutta. And I landed in Calcutta, got a taxi to Sutter Street, because all I had was a list of, I'm by myself too, right? This was not planned. This was like how not to travel. But I went to Sutter Street, and I got a cheap, very cheap hotel. It was $4 a night, and sat in my bed in a hotel. And I'm sitting here. It's the morning, and I thought, okay, well, I'm bored. So I went out to the street, and I called some guy in a rickshaw, and I said, you know where Mother Teresa lives, her sisters? And she says, yeah. And so I got in this rickshaw and drove. You had to register there to volunteer for one of her homes for the dying, which I did. Now, what I didn't realize there at the time was that Calcutta is like Newfoundland. It's on a half hour in the time zone. Did you know that?
I
was there a half hour early, So the nuns were kind enough to let me in anyway, this riffraff, so come on in. And I sat down on a little bench there, and the only room in the mother house with a fan, which was for the volunteers. And who goes walking by but Mother Teresa?
Oh.
No, that can't be her. That's got to be some other nun, And I'll say something about Mother Teresa. She was living there at the time when I was there, and I was at all the night prayers with her, and I did volunteer for one of her homes for the dying. But the interesting thing is that when I saw her, even at that distance, the first day that I saw her, I happened to catch her eye, and what I saw reminded me, it was the same as that monk that I'd met, the same look, just filled with love, And what I thought about, what occurred to me, was that if I were to go back 2,000 years ago and see Jesus on the street, that's what I would have encountered, was that love.
Whoa.
Yeah, I think that's true. And whatever else we think of him, our Savior, the person that we worship as Catholics, that's what it is, and that's who he is, and that's who we are, because he's in our hearts, right? And when we connect with that in our hearts somehow, and we connect with it through loving each other, right? Trying to, and I remember once they as the experience was unfolding, I was there for 2 months, and it's funny because after that experience, I had to go back and finish my master's thesis on equivocation. I tell you, it wasn't really. I don't believe I don't believe I got that done because what happened in Calcutta was pretty life changing. It was interesting because there's a culture shock going to a place like Calcutta. At the time, there's a small neighborhood just outside the Howrah station, which was called the City of Joy. And at the time, it was the most densely populated area in the world, and it was pretty poor. But no, it's when that kind of experience of meeting Jesus, what had happened to me quite, forcefully, was we used to meet people on the street, and they would take them into the home for the dying. And one of the things that we sometimes had to do was shave all their body hair because they were filled with lice and everything. And people would die in the streets. Basically, it's open sewage, right? So they're just lying there waiting to die. And it's awful, the skin sores that they would have. So we'd bring them and we'd give them a pillow and a blanket and a glass of water, and they would usually pass away. And it was a very powerful experience. But the problem was, for me at the time, I'm 25, I think, or something, or 24. It was really hard work. It was really very hot, 44 degrees Celsius in the shade. Moving these big, huge steel beds, moving people, getting down, disinfecting the floors, just wiping them with disinfectant, because a lot of people were incontinent. And, it was really, so 10 o'clock after 4 hours of work, you like to have a little bit of a break. And I remember just at 5 to 10, they bring some guy in, and I had to shave. He had been in an accident getting off. He was hit by a train, actually, and he had some cuts in his head. So I had to try and do the best I could to shave all of his hair. And I'm getting more and more frustrated because my friends were all having their breaks, and I'm stuck with this guy, So I finished with him, and then I went back to have my weak tea, and went back. And then when I got back there to finish cleaning up, the sister Bella was there, and she just tore a strip off me because I'd left the mess. And she said, if you're not going to do this right, she said, just go home. And that was really hurtful. That was my ego, because it's ego, right? Look at me, I'm in Calcutta, I'm working with the poorest of the poor, like this is going to be great. And she says, nope, it's not about that. And she said it was about love. And she reminded me of Mother Teresa, how often she would say to us, because she'd meet us every week, that that's the central message of the whole scripture, is that we're to be men and women of love. So there's this love theme keeps coming back into my life. And so what happened next is really interesting, because I went back and I saw this this new nun. Sister Bella wasn't there, but anyway, and so I said to her, probably for the first time in my life, I said, well, what can I do to help? And she said to me, all you have to do is love him. And I watched how she loved him. I watched how tenderly she touched him. I watched, because he was in agony, because he was filled with sores, and we were using a diluted Javex to cleanse his sores, right? So that was not happy. He died a few days later, so we stopped doing that. But and I remember asking. I share this story a lot, but I remember asking her what his name was, because nobody recognized his dialect. And she says to me, you don't know what his name is? I says, no. She said, his name is Jesus. Because whatever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, she said, you did it to me. And then she said something beautiful. She said, watch Mother Teresa at adoration. Watch how she adores Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. And she said, that's how we must also adore the poorest of the poor. And I thought, wow, that was something. So you're not going to believe this, but a few days later, this Brother Ben comes over, and you know what he said to me? He said, Mother Teresa, Mother wants to see you. And I said, are you kidding me? Let me check the schedule here. What have I got on? Get my iPhone out here. Okay, what? Text me when you're ready to see me. It was 1992. There's no texting. So I went to see her, and it's funny because as I'm beginning to realize what was happening, by that time she'd already won the Nobel Prize, 20 years before that. She was synonymous with goodness and sanctity. and she wanted to see me, you know. So as I remember sitting there waiting and just getting more and more nervous because she was late, not too late, but like a minute late. You know, you're nervous. Like, let's get this over with. You know, what does she want with me? You know, what are you doing? You know, you shouldn't make it. You know, go on, go away. Who let you in? You know, how did you get in? That's what I'm thinking. You know, but she said to me, you know, she asked me. She said to me, "When are you going into the priesthood?" And yeah, I know. And I,
Whoa.
and I
Whoa.
said, yeah, whoa is right, you know.
Whoa.
I said, whoa, whoa, slow down a bit here, you know. But I said to her, I said to her, I was already in the seminary. I said I was there for 4 years. I said I didn't like it. And she said, and so I said, no, I'm not going back. You know, I stay here before I go back there. And she said to me, a vocation is a beautiful gift from God. Don't throw it away. And I thought, I know. Can you imagine this? This is Saint Mother Teresa now telling me. Are you kidding me? Like, really? And that had a very, again, stupid. You know, I didn't realize it at the time, but that obviously had a very profound impact on my decision to go back to the seminary. Now, I didn't go back to the seminary right away. As a matter of fact, I dated a lovely girl who was a fellow volunteer in Calcutta. She was from Belgium, little Pascal. We dated for about 3 years. We broke up, obviously, just so you know. Just want to clarify that right now, you know. But I remember, so I lived in Belgium for a year, and it's kind of funny because when I lived in Belgium, her uncle was a priest, and her uncle said to me, we're going to go to Rome. I'm going to take you to Rome with me. And I said, okay, Rome. Now, at the time, I'm not real Catholic, eh? You know, I'm not. I'm still not. I'm still sort of, okay, whatever. It's interesting. It's there, but I got my life to live, and maybe I'll marry this girl. I don't know. Who knows? But, you know, so her uncle, the priest, that I'm taking her to Rome. I says, well, what's in Rome? I said, well, it's the 250th anniversary of the founding of this Belgian college, I think it was, or something like that. Okay, I'll go. So I'd been living and by the way, I just want to back up just a little bit because this is a weird part of the story. I was at the time studying philosophy, and Pascal had asked me if I would come to Belgium to be with her. And I said, well, what am I going to do there, you know? Well, she lived in a university town, the University of Louvain, which happens to be one of the best, oldest Catholic universities in Europe, in the world. Wow. And well, I said, they'll never take me there, you know. So I applied and I got in. I got into the doctoral preparatory program, and I continued studying philosophy for a year there. And I got a licentiate in philosophy from the University of Louvain, which is where a lot of clergy go to study, you know, if they want to teach in seminaries. And I had nothing to do with any of that. I went there because of a girl. Like, you know, you're kidding me? So this, you know, sometimes clergy, they see my CV, they see this Louvain. Wow, Louvain, you're so lucky. You know, wow, you get to study real Catholic philosophy. Yeah, okay, whatever. Anyway, he wanted to take me. So I went to Rome with him, and we go to mass. We're going to go to mass in the morning, and it wasn't just mass though. It was Pope John Paul II.
No.
Oh my gosh.
You're lying.
So I've actually met 2 saints in my life.
That's crazy.
You're the best.
I know. It's fun. I have pictures. I wonder if I have a picture.
No. Oh
no.
my gosh.
Oh no.
Oh gosh.
I might have.
What?
I don't know. Do I have a picture of him?
You heard it here. That's so cool.
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
You can see that or not, but
Whoa.
me and the look at this skinny.
That's so amazing.
Now I don't know
so
if you
cool.
can see that close. My picture here is just a little wee thing. So I'm holding a book in my hand, right? Can you see that book?
Yeah.
That book is a copy of The Imitation of Christ. And the reason I happened to bring that with me was, besides the fact that I'd actually been reading it, because I was very curious about it. It's a good book, by the way. But I also, that book was given to me by a monk when I was in the monastery, and I kept it with me. I have it upstairs. I don't have time to go get it. Well, now I just threw something away. Okay, hang on. Okay, anyway.
Oh no.
But, anyway, when I was in Calcutta, when I was in Calcutta, I was taught just after Mother Teresa had suggested that I go into the seminary. I had that book in my hand for no other particular reason. I just happened to be walking around with it. I had just been to a store where I bought a little fountain pen for $4 because I like fountain pens. And this was a really good fountain pen, actually. And Mother Teresa herself took that fountain pen out of my hand, grabbed the book, and signed it. And said, God bless you.
Oh.
And that's the book that actually I No, don't get any ideas. He didn't sign it, didn't grab the pen out of my hand to sign it, but he did bless it. So it's very peculiar. Now it's interesting that that's the second living saint that I've met. But I also went back to Rome back in a couple of years ago, when Mother Teresa was canonized. And you can imagine for me what a powerful experience that was, because I guess I'm thinking to myself somehow, have I lived up to this? Okay, I'm here, I did it. But seeing her canonized was just very, very overwhelming. And while we were there, the daughter of Saint Gianna was there as well. And I met her at a dinner that we had. Now, you don't know who she is. She's the daughter of, Saint Gianna was expecting 1962, and she had a choice either to abort the baby and live, or have the baby and risk dying, and she died. And she was canonized as a saint. The girl that I met was her daughter.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, all in Rome. It's really amazing.
You're meeting all the saints.
I know, I'm getting all of them. Yeah, maybe you guys. But anyway, the long and the short of it, though, is I obviously did not go back into the seminary right away, and it wasn't until a few years later that I was teaching English as a second language in South Korea, and I was kind of lonely, sitting on the beach, reflecting on my life. And I thought to myself, maybe what I should do is go into the seminary. And that was 1995.
Okay.
And so I went back to Christ the King in Buffalo, got ordained in 1999, and here I am.
Wow.
So that's part of it. I mean, I'm happy to share some of that with you. I'm just wondering about the time a little bit. That took a little longer than I thought.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
We love hearing about saint stories. Oh my goodness.
It's actually perfect because it leads into some of the questions that the youth had about your ordination and how that was. And then we have some more questions regarding like now. But first, from our youth, they were wondering, how long did it take to be a priest then for you?
Yeah, it took it was interrupted for like 5 or 6 years. So the actual formation program for the priesthood is usually 8 years. So you start from the beginning. You can shorten that a little bit if you already have the required philosophy courses, because you have to have usually they want an undergraduate degree in philosophy, then you study theology. So there's usually 7 academic years, and then there's 1 year of an internship where you actually would live in a parish to see if this is really what you want to do. So it's a lot. It's also seminary life is different. It's not just academics. They also trying to teach you spirituality as well as leadership. So so it's pretty challenging sometimes. But you live in community. You live with a very isolated group of people. So yeah.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. Actually, I'm curious to know, how is like your day of ordination? How is that like, and what were you feeling?
Well, that was crazy. There are 2 ordinations that happen. The first ordination is to the permanent diaconate. They're not permanent, but you ordain a deacon first, and that's when you actually take your vow of celibacy, and you promise to pray the divine office. So that's lower key, but personally, it's a little bit deeper. That's where you actually make that final commitment to it.
Yeah.
And that was a massive snowstorm. And I was actually, the night before my ordination, it was at St. Mary's and St. Catherine's, I got food poisoning, and I was throwing up every 15 minutes.
Oh man.
And I was going to cancel it, right? Okay, I guess this is God's sign of God, you know. So I called the bishop, and the bishop said to me, "Well, can you hold it together for 20 minutes?" I said, "Probably."
Nice.
And he said, "Well, then if you need to go to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom, do what you got to do, and then come back out, and I'll ordain you, then you can go back again." So, that was the strategy, right? So by the next day, because a lot of planning goes into it, right? A lot of people are there.
Yeah.
They selected well in advance, but I actually, by the next morning, I was fine. It was just a very quick, whatever the bug was, it's gone. Of course, I was just taking a vow of celibacy, so maybe there was something psychological going on there too. But then when I got ordained to priesthood, that was like a whirlwind, because there's a priesthood. I was the only one at the time getting ordained. And I remember that because I go outside to get in my car to go to the ordination, and I get a flat tire. So really? So I borrowed somebody's car, somebody fixed the flat. And I remember walking into the cathedral parking lot, and my aunt was talking to my dad, and he said, "Well, he's finally got a job." Wandering all over the world, right? Teaching English in South Korea, going to Belgium, going to India, whatever. You know? So that's so yeah, but they're very proud. So yeah, that was but it was obviously a very special day, and I had no doubt. I knew that this is what was unfolding was the right thing. So, you know, it was good. It was
That's
good.
amazing. Wow. Yeah, that's like the story. Yeah, we're so grateful that you shared your story, and actually, it's so cool. You know all those things.
Well, it's my privilege to just share some of that with you. It's always nice to do that, you know, sometimes. So I don't always, the Mother Teresa stuff comes up quite a bit in my preaching, but I never want to overdo it because you don't want to be the guy that's all ever talks about is her. But why wouldn't I talk about her? I mean, she's amazing.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'd much rather be known as the guy all he ever talks about is Jesus. That would be even better, right?
Yeah. Actually, relating it to currently now during the pandemic, I was wondering. So, how do you think? Because sure, there's like differences from before pandemic came and then now. How do you think that? How do you think the pandemic is affecting Catholics? At the moment.
I think that's a fantastic question, and like my own life, we won't really know until a few years down the road, you know, really know how this has impacted us. What I would say about it is that in my experience of my life, every time I've gone through any kind of a crisis of whatever kind, whether it's self-doubt or whether it's vocation crisis or whether it's what to do or just, you know, strange things happening in my life, I've always emerged from the other side of that a stronger man of faith. And this is a crisis for our world. This is a crisis for our culture. It's brought out an awful lot of division. You know, some people take it very seriously, like myself. Some people think that it's a big conspiracy, that it's a lot of, you know, it's bringing all that out. And I think that in time, I think that that we'll be better for it, for having gotten through it. But we have to get through it. And the way to get through it is to stay close to God, you know, stay close to Christ. Immediately when the pandemic hit, none of us thought that this was going to last very long. I don't think. I was the thing that really made me worry was when they actually canceled the NBA season back in March last year. Remember that?
Oh, I feel you, Father. That was really sad. That was really sad.
There's something up here. This is something. Okay, this is something, right? Yeah. The hard part about it for us as clergy, and I would say this is probably the case for all of our leaders, is, you know, I've been doing the priesthood for 20 years. There's not much that's going to cross my desk that I haven't seen before by now. all of a sudden we're forced to make decisions we've never had to make before. How do we close the church? Do we close the church? Do I keep adoration open? Do I ask people to wear masks? Do I, how do I manage with this latest lockdown? How do I get 9 people in the church, including, and plus myself? How do we do? Those are all decisions we've never had to make before. So there's a bit of decision fatigue going on, I think, with all of us.
Yeah.
But I found it's enriched my faith. It's really made me, draw closer to God. One of the positive things that's happened that's had a huge impact on my own ministry, and I have no idea what impact this is going to have down the road, is the online stuff. I would have never thought of even doing this a year ago. I do night prayer every night online at 9:00. I take Thursdays off, so basically for a whole year, I don't think I've ever missed one, except for a couple of days of vacation back there in October. I found that the feedback that I've got from that is people really, really loved it, and they feel connected to their church. And I'm thinking to myself, and Mass, the morning Mass, 8:00 every morning, I'm going to slow that down a bit now that we're back to 30%, thank God. And I'm alone here as a pastor. My associates moved on to St. Denis. So I got to be careful of my own health. But the feedback I got from people that just love watching it, I get maybe 150, 200 views on Facebook on my Mass in the morning. And I'm thinking, like, why? Like, there's no CGI. There's nothing. I mean, it's got to be the most boring thing you've ever seen. But you know what, though? I mean, it's like me doing the Stations of the Cross when I'm in high school. Like it's God's grace that draws us to this stuff, I guess. It's quite. And the other thing that's been really amazing is the connection with the schools, because large parish, Our Lady of the Scapular here in Niagara Falls, I got 5 elementary schools. Normally I would see 2 schools at a time in the church. There'd be probably 400 or 500 kids. They're all goofing off or whatever. I'm this little tiny stick man up there at the altar that they can't even see. But now I do Mass for them once a week for all of those kids in all 5 schools. It's 1,000 kids, and they're all watching it like right here, and so, when I see a kid on the street or something, hey, look, hey, Father Paul, what's going on? Like, wow, really? So it's cute, I know, but the recognition is wonderful, but it's also about connecting with the church, right? That's been a really positive thing. I see my role as a pastor to be somehow a source of stability for the community, not just the Catholics, but for everybody. To say, hey, hang in there, we'll get through it. I try to stay positive and stay real, but stay, and as much as I can. I have good days and bad days too. But I know how hard this must be for some people. And it's not been hard for me. And I'm very happy to communicate my positivity and my happiness. If that helps, then that's great. It's good. So.
Thank you for that. Actually, something that I've been wondering is for the different effects of COVID and quarantine, like some people have been maybe growing closer, as you said, and then some may have also been falling away or maybe not attending as much. For how can we help or those around us who you see that maybe falling away from the faith? Yeah.
That's a great question, and I would say whatever you do, be careful not to overdo it, not to put too much pressure on people, because they do have to find their own way. And I know that we talk about evangelization, which is the most important thing for us to do. The question is, how do we do that? And I think that we don't do it at all. It's Jesus that does it, right? And I think that what we have to do is just be ourselves and accept ourselves and accept others. And I think that when we do that, the naturalness that Christ is within us will come out. And that's how you've been drawn to Christ, right? That's what's happened to you, and the best way we can help people is, it comes back to what I said earlier. We just have to love them and really love them, and not love them intellectually and say, okay, you guys have to get to church, but to feel in your heart, to look at this person and say, wow, what a great person, and aside from judging them for going to church or not going to church, but just that if they can feel that acceptance, if they can feel that presence of Christ in you, don't worry about it. They'll be drawn to it, or they'll reject it, which is also their choice, right? that's all. That's the only thing that I can say that that would be effective in doing that. So you can take some of the pressure off, because then all of a sudden it's not up to us, it's up to Christ, right?
Yeah.
But it's important that we, you know, it's important that we try as best we can to stay connected with people too, though, right? You know, you can't move someone to Christ without at least being connected to them. You know, it's staying in touch with them and staying in contact with them in a way that they feel is a genuine connection. You know, so it's that's I think really, really important. There's a danger. There's a danger in and that Jesus called it a lot, but there's a danger in a certain kind of religiosity that turns people right off. And religiosity, I think, I don't know, I could study it for the rest of my life, but it seems to come when we are forcing it too much. And I just don't think that that's ever going to work. You know, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but but you know, when I got back from Calcutta, people asked me, well, Mother Teresa, what was she actually like? And one of the things that I surprised myself by saying, and I'm going to say it to you here now, so please don't be scandalized, but I said that she's not that religious. And I found myself saying that what I meant by that was that she's very real, very real. Yeah. And for her, being a saint wasn't a matter of behaving a certain way. It was a matter of being who she was. And you know, I think that's, I don't think that that's anything more than that is too much. But look what she did. You know, she's, I don't think anybody in this world is evangelized as much as she has, when you really think about it. You know, now people looking at her from the outside, of course, well, of course she's religious. What do you think? You know, but not in that sense. I mean, it was something to see. When somebody comes at me with an awful lot of religion, I'm not sure I trust that. You know, but if somebody comes to me themselves, who they are authentically, I trust that. You know, and hopefully people see that in me and they trust that also. All appearances to the contrary, you know, yeah. Religious, you know, but you know, it's hard to say that because it's in her authentic being herself, being who she was, being who God wanted her to be. That's what connected her with so many people. And I don't think she cared to be thought of as being religious either. She just was a woman of love, and she knew what she had to do. She wanted to help the poor, and she was singularly focused on that. And she created this vast order of this congregation of nuns, you know. And think of the, you know, sometime when I got back home one time, somebody asked me, well, what good did you do? You know, you didn't take care of any of the structures of anything like that. And I said, well, I brought a dying man a glass of water and a pillow. I did a lot for him, you know, because he, you know, in fact, she's quoted as saying that, you know, that somebody asked her that same question, and and somebody said, well, I've lived like a worm and I'm going to die like an angel, you know. And that's something, and that's not so there's a difference between faith and religiosity. That's all I'm warning you about. And then that has to come from deep in our hearts, or anywhere in our hearts, even on the surface, whatever, as long as it's there, as long as it's love, right? Heart's a pretty big thing. So, you know, I don't know if that makes any sense.
That's really beautiful. Wow. Yeah, actually, I love that.
I love that.
That's so good.
Yeah, it makes you, hopefully, you know, you feel better. Like, you don't have to force it, right? You know, just do yourself.
Yeah.
It flows out of the love we have. And this is actually perfect because, you know, you've met Mother Teresa, you met St. John Paul II, and like all these experiences. Would you have any practical tips for growing in desire for holiness?
Yeah, basically what I just said. I think growing in desire for holiness is about learning and about accepting yourself and about learning about God, and I think surrendering to God as well, and allowing God to sort of draw you. I guess one of the things that I know, ask me in 5 years, I may have a different answer, but I've come more and more to realize the idea of grace. And in holiness, it is something that also comes from outside of us and is given to us as a gift. And, you know, we can just accept that. And I think that's where the desire for holiness comes in. If we're trying to be holy too hard, I think we're doing it wrong. I think we have to open up our hearts to his grace, and his grace will show us what to do. And we have to have faith in that, and yeah, life's not always going to be perfect. There's going to be challenges and difficult times and times of sadness and times of great joy. But faith is deeper than all that. So my advice would be to just keep in mind that it's God that does all the work. It's not you. Just surrender to that and enjoy it.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Amen.
Wait, yeah. And before we end, yeah. So before we end with closing prayer, just wanted to ask Father Paul, do you have any things that you'd like us to share with others? We'll wait for them to join you in night prayer or announcements.
Well, you asked me about that, and just before we started, and I thought, yeah, I guess so. I'm on Twitter, at Father MacNeil, MacNeil. You could probably post that later. I have our parish has a Facebook account where I do mass and night prayer. We also have a YouTube account. It's Scapular Niagara. I do night prayer every night at 9. You're certainly welcome to join me for that. It only takes about 10 minutes. It's from the Divine Office. You're certainly welcome to join me for that. I don't have a huge online presence. It was funny because when I was doing one of my communion services a couple of weeks ago, one of the parents, one of those kids in our school brought his little boy. He wanted to meet me because they saw me on YouTube on the school. I said, this is really. And yeah, he thinks you're a YouTuber. I'm not a YouTuber. Really, I'm not. But he wants to be a YouTuber when he grows up too. So maybe he'll be a priest YouTuber. There you go. So I don't have a very strong online. Well, I'm in my 50s. It wasn't something we were brought up with. But certainly is, if you wanted to find me, but more important that you find Jesus. I think he's the one that will lead you in that. So, you're welcome wherever I am. You're welcome wherever I am.
That's beautiful. So yeah, is there any more last things that you have? Yeah, I guess.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, Father Paul, would you like to lead us in closing prayer then?
Yeah, you know what? I think I will. I don't think I will. I will. What I was wondering is if maybe, let me see if I have this. Maybe we can actually say that prayer of St. Francis, if I can grab it really quickly.
Oh,
Yes.
Since I know that
I
love that.
that's good.
Seconds here, unless anybody else has it. I can go through all my stuff. I know I have it online somewhere. Let's see here. All right. Let me see.
This is such a good prayer.
It's a beautiful prayer.
Yeah.
It really.
Mm-hmm.
I use it all the time. I can't find it. Amazing. All right, let me. Can I just it's on my computer. I know that for sure.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair to say infinite. I can put my hand on it real quick.
Oh, yeah, Saint Anthony. So
Pray to
great.
Saint Anthony.
Go to one of my sources here, and I should be able to find it. The prayer of Pope Francis, the prayer of Saint Francis. Okay, there.
Hmm. Yeah. If I remember correctly, I think Mother Teresa actually read that prayer when she got Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes,
so
she did.
Yeah.
Oh,
It
that's
keeps going back to Mother
Whoa, it's
Teresa.
all coming full circle right now.
Yeah,
It's all coming full circle.
I was like, this is such a good prayer. And she exemplifies it. I'm like, this is so beautiful. Yeah. That's
Well,
so crazy.
God's will to do it right now. Let me tell you, because I can't find. You know what? I'm gonna go online and get it. That's the best way to do it, right?
Father Paul, when you said like your days of ordination were like whirlwinds, I was gonna ask if more saints were there. Like, I'm like, were there
Whoa.
more?
Well, they may have been there in spirit. They could have us, you know.
They all attend.
They all attend.
They're all there. What
They're
happened?
all there.
How'd this guy slip through? All right, I'm going to say this little prayer. I did find one online. here.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
All right, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. And where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. And may Almighty God bless you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father Paul.
Oh, that was so amazing.
Thank you for everyone here to listen. Just a reminder that St. Teresa of Lisieux says, holiness consists simply in doing God's will and being just what God wants us to be. And so, God bless everyone, and we hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Bye.
You guys.
Bye.